Welcome back to our project management journey. My name is Marissa Leviani, and let's keep going. Big ideas can feel overwhelming until you break them down. In this episode, we'll take a project from huge and confusing to clear and doable using deliverables and work breakdown structure. Let's dive into episode 3.
This is the part of your plan that allows you to track and communicate the timeline and milestones of your project to people in and outside your organization that are actively involved in the project and whose interests may be either positively or negatively affected by the execution or completion of the project. Now, some examples of internal stakeholders include management or your superiors. This could also be your teacher or parent. It also includes team members, your project sponsor, and different organizational departments and units. Examples of external stakeholders might include customers of your organization or company, suppliers of products to your company, vendors that you work with, government entities that you have to interact with, and general community members that may be affected by your project. There is also a infographic in the right-hand corner that helps you to really think through where each one of your stakeholders should be placed. The x-axis is the level of influence, and the y-axis is the level of interest. So a stakeholder would be marginal if they have a low level of influence and a low level of interest. A influential individual or stakeholder would be someone with a high level of influence and a low level of interest. Now, someone affected would be someone with a high level of interest and a low level of influence. And finally, a key player in your project would be someone with a high level of influence and a high level of interest. The next process is the planning process, and this is where all the details get laid out. The plan created at this point in the process will guide your team through the execution of the project. Things included are the project scope, which outlines what will and will not be included in the project. It also includes a budget, the team roles, the milestones you hope to reach, and deadlines associated with your project. This is the process where it is also important to think about the potential risks and create a plan to mitigate those risks or make sure that they minimize the opportunity to happen. A stakeholder management plan is also a part of this planning process and a communication plan. So, planning process involves organizing and identifying the components of a project, and the project manager and the team work collaboratively to develop the scope of work, create what's called a work breakdown schedule, which we'll talk about later, identify resources, estimate the time needed to accomplish specific tasks, and recommend major deliverables along the way. Let's talk about project scope. Scope is a project's boundaries and what work will be done during the project lifecycle. The scope defines the project's parameters and establishes what is called a baseline for measuring success. Scope provides a common understanding of project expectations, what will and what will not be done. In other words, what is in scope and what is out of scope. So going through this process will allow you to produce what's called a scope statement. Now, a scope statement clarifies and expands the information that was originally produced in the project charter, but also adds additional and important information as part of the planning process. These will include the constraints of the projects, the assumptions of your project, the risks that you may have to mitigate with your project, and the boundaries of your project. That includes what will and will not be a part of this project. And finally, what is called user acceptance criteria. User acceptance criteria is what the stakeholders will accept as completed deliverables. Let's dig into the project work breakdown structure, otherwise known as the WBS. This is a really useful tool because it is a checklist of all the work, the deliverables, and tasks that you need to undertake in completing your project, prioritized in their order of completion. When you're creating a work breakdown structure, you will identify all of the major tasks and activities that are associated with your project. You'll work to put those tasks in the order of completion with which they need to happen, and you'll also work to identify the deliverables and the milestones that you'll want to hit along the way to show that you're making progress on completing your project on time, in scope, and on budget. So in this case, the example that we have here is a birthday celebration. And we've broken that down into a variety of different major categories that include guests, food and beverage, supplies, setup, and cleanup. Now you can create sub-tasks and deliverables under these major categories to help you further define all of the different tasks and deliverables that are associated with these different parts and pieces. For instance, under supplies, you may have to think about getting a birthday cake, you may have to think about getting utensils, party favors, decorations, presents, etc. You can nestle under supplies all of those different tasks and deliverables to be completed so that you can better manage and follow your project from start to finish. So now, if you have time, we want to pause and we want to allow you to practice developing a basic work breakdown structure. Take the previous slide and take the work that you just did, if you completed the activity before, on the celebration who, what, where, when, why, and how, and utilize that to create your own work breakdown structure around your friend's birthday celebration.
Oh, I used to write to-do list, but now I know to call it a work breakdown structure. Genius! I am learning so much. The main idea I learned is that great planning is all about structure. I appreciate the practice part of this video because it will help me process my learning and be able to develop the skill of project planning one step at a time. Next up, timelines, responsibilities, constraints, and the risk we need to think about before the project gets moving. See you in the next episode.